welcome everybody to today's member update, Rails member update. Thanks very much for being here. As always, we will be monitoring your chat for questions and doing our best to respond to them. I think at various points of the meeting, there will be a lot of questions, so please just bear with us. We will get to them. We're gonna start off with just me welcoming you all again. And I want to begin by just giving some general news, a general update. So the first item is our budget and a funding update. There isn't really any news. Unfortunately, the veto session that usually happens in the fall is canceled due to COVID, like so many things. And there's not expected to be in session again until January sometime. So we don't expect to really know anything about this year's budget and any potential changes, or indeed next year's budget either. There is doubt that there will be any kind of a revenue proposal, in other words, a tax increase. That's what we heard yesterday at the PPC meeting, the ILA PPC meeting, from Derek Blada, the ILA legislative consultant expert, that, you know, given that the graduated income tax didn't pass, doesn't seem too likely that the General Assembly would be willing to tackle a tax increase in another way. But you never know. It says Illinois, you never know. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. In the meantime, you know, we have heard potentially for a while now, ever since the you know, last summer, even sooner, since the income tax proposal was proposed, and I mean the graduated income tax change, and of course since the pandemic and the terrible revenue shortfalls that has brought, that there potentially could be budget cuts this year as well as next year. That is in FY22 is next year. We have, as I have told you before, suspended any expenditures that we didn't have to make. We haven't bought new computers. We didn't give raises, different things like that. We didn't buy any vehicles. We're just, you know, doing what we actually have to do, and you know, waiting to see what happens this year in case we have to cut our budget this year, and then of course don't know anything about what will happen next year. So that's what we know at this point. In terms of Rails and what's going on with us internally, we're all still working from home pretty much. Administrative staff delivery is going, and you'll hear more about that later on. In terms of most of us working from home, we are also, of course, I mean, some of us come into the office for different reasons. I'm in the office right now, but we always practice social distancing and wear masks, and we have limited capacity that are allowed in any of the buildings at any time. So that's, and obviously we're not hosting any meetings here at Burr Ridge either, although we do, generally speaking, at the board meeting, because of the Open Meeting Act, somebody has to be here for the board meeting, you know, an official, like a board president or me. So if I can't be here, we do have a board member here. But that's really the only time that we're doing anything there's anything that's required that we have to be here for. So the next thing we were going to talk about, I asked Layla Heath to talk about the ebook grant that we're very excited about, and then we'll pause and see if you all have any questions.
Okay, so Rails received a $125,000 grant through the Illinois Office of the Secretary of State as part of the CARES Act. And we are going to use these funds to purchase K through 12 e-content for the shared eRead Illinois Access 360 collection. We will add both educational and recreational materials to supplement the high demand titles that are the focus of the collection. The pandemic created an urgent need for reading materials that can be accessed remotely by school-age students due to the new remote and hybrid learning models. And in fact, since the pandemic began in March, more than 70 school libraries have joined eRead Illinois Access 360 shared collection. This is unprecedented. In previous years, it's really usually we lose a couple schools and we gain a couple schools. It's really been wonderful to welcome these new school libraries to eRead. Public libraries also face the challenge of providing e-content for students as they're not able to access materials in the library in many cases, and they're also spending much more time at home. So this grant will enable Rails to meet these very important needs for both library types, as the funds will purchase over 4,000 ebooks and audiobooks to supplement the collection. The grant began December 1st. It will run through September of 2021. Our goal is to complete purchasing materials by the end of May 2021, so we're all set for summer reading and those kinds of things too. We'll order materials weekly and spend about $20,000 a month. We are selecting materials with the help of Baker and Taylor's collection development experts. We are looking at high demand titles also by accepting suggestions from our member libraries. The selection will be based on professional journal reviews, recommendation lists, state awards, and member requests and feedback. You can, we do invite you to submit your suggestions for the collection. We had some people reach out about that. We were so excited about the response when the news first went out about this. And that was one of the questions that we got. And so we created a form that is, it's an online form on the eRead Illinois website that we hope will facilitate that process. You will need to be a member of eRead Illinois, and you will need to log in to the eRead section of the website. I will put the address in the chat after I'm done speaking. And you can also visit eReadIllinois.com for more information or to join the program. So if there are any questions, I guess I would invite those, or any comments, and otherwise I'll turn it back over to Dee.
There was a question in the chat, Layla, from Diane Foote about whether we would like 2021 iRead themed bibliographies. And Monica responded, yes, it would be great. So,
yeah, we would love
thank
those.
you, Diane. That's great. So anybody have any questions about anything we've talked about so far? Yes, Leighton, eRead is something that libraries join proactively. And you have come to the right place, because there are people here who can help you join. Not right now, but so if you want to join, we'll get back to you. So any questions? Any other questions? Yes, Carolyn, that's what I said. We did refrain from raises this year. We don't have a plan for next year. We're waiting to hear what the budget looks like. It's a question from Carolyn Coulter about our staff raises.
Deirdre, did you see the question from Aaron in the Q&A section?
Nope.
Does the ebook grant mean that public libraries not in eRead/Access 360 can join for free to have access to those state grant funded collections through CARES?
That is not something that I can answer right now. We had that that's not what we had, something that we had put into the grant, but we'll figure that out and get back to you. So, people who are chatting out there, I think it's best if you chat to, thanks Kate Hall, if you chat to panelists and attendees so that everybody can see everything that's being said in the interest of, even though we're not required to do open meeting for this, it's still, good for everybody to be able to see what everybody else is asking for. The Rails contact person to email if you want to join eRead Illinois is Anna Beam. Is that right, Layla? I assume?
Yes, but I did just put the website link, and information about joining eRead is there as well. And under the About section, there's also information about the grant, as well as that suggestion form for content. And Anna
Okay.
Bean is our e-content specialist.
Thank you.
I'll also mention we did in our BiblioBoard library collection that is available to everybody in the state at no cost. We received a grant through the census, and we added an additional 500 titles to that collection in the summer. So that's another option for people that are looking for e-content in this time of high demand.
And just to, I think, a little more clarification about the Aaron Sco's question about the e-read. No, we did not put that in the grant, nor were we required to put it in there, that e-read would become free any more than Heartland did in terms of what they have down there with the cloud library. At least that's my understanding of how the grant was written and what the requirements were. I think that most of you know who are in eRead know that it is extremely affordable, and that really the member fees that do support it go entirely to I think entirely to support content.
Mm-hmm.
Glad for all the interest in the ebook grant. We're really excited about it, and think it's as yes, thanks, Patty Smith, and as Layla did say, it's been really clear how important e-resources have become to all types of libraries, but I would say especially for school libraries since the pandemic. Ryan Livergood is pointing out that the fee estimator is a very handy tool, just to give you an idea of what this is something that ereadillinois.com, if you go to that URL, you see that you can do that to figure out, pretty much very closely how much it would cost for you to join eRead. So we appreciate all these great commercials for eRead, that's for sure. Yes, thanks, Dan, for reinforcing that about chatting to everybody. Okay, are there more questions? You can keep putting them in there, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go or after. But I think in the meantime, in the interest, has the eRead interface been improved? Well, we could spend a lot of time on that. We have spent a lot of time and energy with Baker and Taylor, and I say that because it has improved. Yes, it's not, it's not Libby, but on the other hand, it's a lot better than it was, and I think the best way for you to see that is to try it out. Okay, so I see that Greg and all of my friends at the Illinois State Library are ready and waiting. So I'd like to introduce Greg and thank him for coming and telling us about some very important changes to the administrative rules, to the per capita grant, and including the new e-resources card that is a part of the change to the clarification or expansion of the existing administrative rules. So it's all yours, Greg.
Thank you, Dee, for the introduction. I am joined today by several colleagues, and I'm sorry, I do have to wear my mask, so I hope that everyone can hear me. But I did want to make a couple, at least one, truly a new introduction to everyone. Amanda Tsai has recently joined the Library Development Group. She will be working with many libraries around the state in what will ultimately be her role as probably LSTA coordinator for the Illinois State Library. She was already on the Talking Book and Braille Service staff here at the State Library, and we're thrilled to have her join the Library Development Group. We have Gwen Harrison, who many of you are already familiar with here, Karen Egan, the head of the Library Development Group, and Joe Natale, our Chief Deputy Director. And this is a bit more formal because we are going to talk about some of the administrative rule processes and what is in place. Those rules have been filed for their first notice, and so we're now in a comments period. So depending upon the questions that arise or the information that transpires here, we will have to send a record of that to our ethics officer here at the state or at the Secretary of State's office. So, but more about that as we go in. So the first item on the agenda is the FY21 Public Library per capita and equalization grant application. And I'm certain that most people by now have looked at that if you are a public library or will be an applicant of that grant from our office. And there's some noticeable changes to what that application asked this year. There were several things that led to this, one of which was, of course, the Secretary's budget was increased by $2.6 million for FY21 in support of this program. We are hopeful that certainly remains in place as we go through review of the applications and award of those in FY21 and on into FY22. The Illinois Library Association had released Serving Our Public 4.0, the standards for Illinois public libraries in January of 2020. And it also happened for FY21. The state library had yet to release its requirements for the grant program. With all of those things in mind, it seemed appropriate and discussion with the library systems too ahead of time that we really take a look at this grant application and move it back to what the law and administrative rules have says about the program and what is historically always said, and that really eligibility is based upon the services that a public library is providing or showing progress toward providing, and that's to be based upon the Illinois Library Standards most recently adopted by the Illinois Library Association. And also, they're obviously required to either levy a tax at the appropriate rate as identified in legislation, or in lieu of that levy, the corporate authority is to provide the library with an equitable amount of what would be raised. And so we believe that this application, which was recently released, does just that. It really focuses on all of the chapters contained in the new standards document, asks that libraries review the checklist after looking at the chapter, and then identify areas of compliance or non-compliance and how they're working toward that. In addition, they're asked to indicate how the use of this funding will be utilized to support those services within their service area. And finally, simply report on the use of that funding from FY19. The due date for the application is a rather significant change to what libraries have seen in the past, was modified. It's now moved to March 15 from what had been January 15, at least for this year. I don't know that that will continue into ensuing fiscal years, but but it seems appropriate to make that modification this year with everything that has occurred in 2020. So that gives everyone a little more time. But it doesn't ask that the library complete any further task, engage with their board in something different, where there's a continuing education requirement, et cetera, something that may have occurred quite specific to the per capita grant application in years past. That's really all I have on that particular topic. I think it's better if we maybe address questions topic by topic based on what I'm to cover this afternoon. I can't see the chat from here, so.
There are no questions so far.
Just a
Okay.
note from ILA that Serving Our Public is back ordered, but they are expecting reprints literally any minute. So that's good news.
Rails also
Sure.
will be getting more copies when they're available. And we'll announce that in our weekly e-news to let everybody know. Oh, it looks like we got a couple questions here now. Was the deadline for expenditure changed? I have December 31st, 2020.
December 31st, 2020 for the FY19 grant.
They're talking about deadline for expenditure. I'm not sure what that means. Was the
Would have
deadline for
been
expenditure changed?
expenditure of the FY19 grant. So that's the grant they would have received well over a year ago. No, that deadline was not changed.
Nothing else so far.
There's actually a question in the Q&A section. Just check the application link on the state library website, and the grant application is the same one we completed last year. Is that nope. Okay, that doesn't, okay. Yeah, it looks like that one's solved. Never mind.
Yeah, they would need to refresh their browser, I think. And
Yeah.
there was some question at one time, if you Googled for that application,
Right.
you were coming up with the old one, even though there was no live link on the state library's webpage.
Hey, you know, those librarians, Greg, they'll find it no matter what. So, yes, so then, yes, some of you got your copy with Directors University. So yes.
Okay, then I think we will move on to the next topic of the day. And on the agenda, it says cards for kids legislation and administrative rules. But I think this is an overreaching about non-resident public library services, because that's what the administrative rules are really attempting to address. So certainly the cards for kids legislation was contained in Public Act 101-632, which passed this past spring in the very different General Assembly, but it did pass with as an amendment to the greater piece of legislation, and it had unanimous consent on the vote, which leaves us in the place of, explaining what that really said. And what it did was actually simply amend the local library law and the Public Library District Act law regarding non-resident services, and indicated that the typical non-resident fee was not to be charged to a non-resident in an unincorporated area in Illinois who is a student whose household falls at or below the U.S. Department of Agriculture's income eligibility requirement. Which many people were asking, what does that actually mean? So, well, going back to what was proposed in the legislative cycle was that this was called the Cards for Kids Act, but it really was an amendment, and to be incorporated into, again, the provisions of the Local Library Act and the Public Library District Act. So taking that information and what we understood was the sponsor of the legislation's intent was we looked at the U.S. Department of Agriculture income eligibility guidelines, and that leads one directly to the free or reduced school lunch program that is administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but is also required to be provided by every public school and school district within the state of Illinois. So we took the administrative rule section, or the public library non-resident services section from there, and started developing several changes, not limited to just cards for kids, but also in what Dee had just indicated about e-resources, and there was a piece about veterans who qualify for an exemption from real estate taxes as well. And that particular question has been raised several times in recent years because the property tax code had changed. And it's not something that libraries run across frequently, but when it comes up, it seemed appropriate to clarify that within the administrative rules. So we have really three areas where the non-resident rules are being amended, or we're at the first notice of possible amendment, and we're in the 45-day comment period, which began on November 30th. First of all, we'll talk a bit about the e-resources to non-residents. And this came up as a question, I think actually originating in Rails primarily, on what could libraries do during this pandemic and the crisis they faced, one with, somewhat of providing library services, but also being very supportive of education within the state. And so we had our legal counsel go back and look at what the statute actually said in this area of resources, and could those services be provided free of charge by public libraries. And indeed, they agreed that that was possible, but of course there would have to be limitations. So what you find now in this first reading, or this first notice, is the definition of what those e-resources would be, and that what the limitations would be on someone receiving those free of charge from a public library. This does not really necessarily indicate that this is a card. That would be up to the library to decide. This is not a mandate of any sort. This is something that a local library may determine they wish to engage in. There are a significant number of considerations to be undertaken before a public library and their board would make that determination. One of which will be what your agreements for those e-resources indicate, what your service area is to be allowed, what the population is to be allowed. And that will have to be determined library by library based upon what you have developed with a vendor, what you may have developed locally yourself, what you've engaged in with the regional library system, and go from there. This, again, is not by any means a requirement. It's just what is permissible under current statute, or at least what our legal counsel thought. It seemed it was more appropriate to put this in administrative rules than in an FAQ document that could be altered much more frequently and changed from time to time. So we've incorporated it so that everyone would have the same understanding regarding that. The second piece was the veterans exemption, and I think this is really quite self-explanatory, is that when you get into charging for non-resident fees, that veterans who are also exempt from taxation under the property tax code simply aren't to be charged for this fee. The veteran or their surviving unmarried spouse is to provide the documentation that they would receive from the county clerk to the library when they are seeking that non-resident card. And that is a process that they have to go through with their county each year. Regarding the cards for kids piece, this really does have to do with the public library card. And again, because the way the legislation was written, the fee is not to be charged to the non-resident student who qualified for the free or reduced school lunch program. So within the proposed rule, we give a definition of who the student would be, which I can share that with you now. For purposes of this part, it means an individual currently enrolled in a public or nonprofit private school, K through 12, who does not have his or her personal residence within a public library service area. The student or the applicant would have to provide the documentation from the school, which is our understanding that at the time they enroll in school, they would be providing the school with this information, but they would be providing the library with information regarding their eligibility for that free and school lunch program. When this legislation first came out, there was a huge concern that libraries would have to be looking at financial data of applicants. That is not the case, but they will have to, the applicant for the library card will have to provide this documentation of their eligibility from the school district. There are some school districts, and in this case it would make the public library's role a little bit easier, that have adopted the community eligible provision where the entire student body is eligible for free or reduced lunch. So this piece of this, though, is that once a public library has determined that they are going to issue non-resident cards, this waives the fee for those eligible students in the state. And in that respect, it is a requirement once you are involved in the non-resident program. Right now, I think we would estimate, I know that Diane at the Illinois Library Association had looked at some numbers early on. We've looked at some statistics again, based upon what the State Board of Education is reporting now under the Illinois Report Card. And given they're indicating that approximately 48.5% of all students are eligible for free or reduced lunch in the state. If you look at, just some very broad calculations of if there are 1.9 million students, 48%, that's about 949 of those students are eligible for a free or reduced lunch. But if you apply the same percentage of non-resident, or the same percentage to the student population as the total non-resident population of the state, that number falls dramatically. I think from early estimates, there was a possibility of maybe 60,000 students might be eligible. I'm coming up today with an a calculation of more about 76,000 possible students, and that's about 3.8% of the total student population. And that's if they seek a card. This is not to be, I've heard this termed as the Cards for Kids program, and it's really not a program that has to be addressed proactively or established. It's simply the fee is not to be charged when the applicant for the non-resident card can provide this documentation to the public library.
Hey, Greg, there's a couple of questions. One is this something that we are required to participate in? And I think what you said was the public libraries boards vote to participate in the non-resident program.
Correct?
Then yes, you must. That includes the Cards for Kids Act. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that was to Valerie Woodley. And then does the Cards for Kids apply to homeless populations?
Well, that is something we're still looking at. And that came up in a conversation not long ago. And we did pull the legislation regarding where a homeless child is to be enrolled in a school district and how that might apply to a public library. And we will have to go back and read that more closely. That's actually, that legislation is sitting on my desk now.
Does
So more
any-
information will be coming about that.
Okay, thank you. So stay tuned, everybody.
There's actually another one here. I don't know if you, that I think is on the Cards for Kids. For libraries that have intergovernmental agreements with schools for student cards, does this essentially void the intergovernmental agreement? It seems based on the interpretation you've provided, intergovernmental agreements that charge school districts for those non-resident cards based on local non-resident fees cannot continue to exist.
No, I wouldn't say that that's the case. They may have to make an adjustment for those students who qualify for the free or reduced lunch.
Makes sense.
That intergovernmental agreement isn't limited to just those individuals. It's the whole student body that they would be providing service for.
Does any of this change where they should get their non-resident library card from?
It does not.
Does not, right. I remember that in the conversation. And what about homeschooled students?
Well, the free or reduced school lunch program does not apply to homeschool students. And if that were to be entertained, the library would be then looking at probably income tax returns of the household, and that's not what the intent is here. That would be the only way to verify the eligibility.
Then there's a question, if youth cards require adult guarantors, does the entire household receive cards?
I don't believe so. And there are libraries that already have policies on how they're issuing cards to minors. And the administrative rules acknowledge the existence of those policies and the ability of the library to maintain that. This is probably going to require public libraries who are issuing these and are faced with this issue of eligible students to go back and look at that policy and develop something for how they're going to do this. Some will have to have parental approval, and the requirements for the age requirement for when that parental approval is required is not consistent across the state. That's a local decision.
Then if a non-resident student is allowed to get a library card at no cost, is the library able to apply existing policies for lost or damaged materials or fines for late materials?
Yes, they are. And I'm glad that question was asked. That seems to be a frequently asked question, which segues into the status of an FAQ regarding non-resident services. We're still developing that because we are picking questions from this discussion that are now going to have to be included in its development. And so it is a living document. I would also say that that document, when it's released, is probably going to be split from what it was. It was jumbled together with so much regarding reciprocal access, reciprocal borrowing, and interlibrary loan, and non-resident cards. So we kind of made the decision this well, yesterday, that this really needs to be split up. There needs to be a non-resident FAQ and a reciprocal access, reciprocal borrowing, and interlibrary loan FAQ. It would just make it a little more straightforward, I think, and shortens the documents considerably.
Here's another one for the FAQ possibly. We are confused about whether or not the student gets his card from the library which is closest physically or the library which is associated with their school system.
It would be with their school system. And in this case, I don't know how a resident or a non-resident makes the case for commonality of community interest, because it's for the school district. They're providing you the information from the school districts in which they're enrolled.
There are also a couple questions about the veterans. So are we required to issue cards to disabled veterans who live in unserved areas? I think 2 people asked that.
Yes, but they do not have to. The veteran's exemption, if the veteran is injured 70% or more during active duty, is what I would have to look at it more closely. Anyway, they file for exemption with their county clerk, and it's much like the homestead exemption works for many other people in this state. But as a result of that disability, their homestead exemption is 100% of the equalized assessed valuation. There's no tax bill due. So they receive services that are typically supported by a tax levy free of charge.
We've gotten another question now about where the student, switching back to cards for kids, can get the card. So if we're in a consolidated school district and 2 libraries cover that district, the student can get their card from either of us. Is that correct?
Yes, in that case, the student would make a choice, and it would seem logical that it's closest. I think that's also a place where the law and administrative rules have a place for the regional library systems to have a say in that, or give direction to library.
Okay, then here's
So
another. Oh, go ahead, Deirdre.
I was going to say, so another variation on the theme. Does a library selecting not to provide free non-resident e-resource access under this new proposition / administrative rules mean that it cannot participate in reciprocal borrowing like
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. This is just a service they might entertain to provide to non-residents.
There's more discussion on here about the e-read or the e-resources grants to all of the systems that or to the systems that the state library made, being that these are federal funds. This is Aaron is saying this. I would think lowering the barrier to access these grant collections should be a goal. It's always a goal to lower, to remove barriers. I think we'll have to take that one offline. It's really not about the administrative rules. And there's plenty of questions about this. Let's see. What else were you going to say, Mary? I probably missed a couple in between.
Well, there's another one here. I don't think we've done this one. Has there been any discussion in the state legislature to extend grants to school libraries or districts so they can serve all of their district students also? My library service, I think the word area is missing. My library service area includes 3 different school districts who would love to partner with us in issuing library cards to all their students in a class, and those students are served by a different home library that they would have access to.
There's not been any current consideration of that as for grant funding specifically to public libraries to do that, but that's very much what the historic money that the state put into Project Plus grants or, development And those were curtailed because ultimately, unless that's ongoing state funded, once it became locally funded, it required a tax referendum. And we were required to quit using federal funding, could ultimately lead to a vote. That was a number of years ago. So that's, I think, a greater conversation or a larger conversation that we would have to entertain for the future.
Okay, and I'm not sure if we asked this one. Does a library selecting not to provide free non-resident e-resource access under the new proposition mean it cannot participate in reciprocal borrowing, like not selling non-resident cards does?
No, there's no,
That was,
there's no implication if they choose not to. They can make the decision.
I don't understand the question from Chris Seebuck about what about the school district's tax funding? What is that? If you could clarify, that would be helpful. I don't see any other open questions. I'm sure you're still thinking of some. I know that the state library is having another meeting next week with Heartland about all of this, and I bet they'll come up with a lot of other interesting things that will also go into the FAQ. Is that a fair statement, Greg?
I think that's a very fair statement. It's actually going to occur Friday.
Friday, okay.
It'll be before the weekend.
All right.
But
Good.
I would also say that if any individual has a question regarding the administrative rules or comments, to please send those to Joe Natale here at the State Library. He's designated, or the designee, to be the recipient of those while we're in this comment period regarding the administrative rules.
Do the administrative rules require access to all e-content, or could we do databases but not ebooks, or presumably ebooks but not databases? Yeah, that's a good question, Gina.
The rules will allow the library to determine what that access is. It's an overreaching definition, but it's not to be all inclusive, so they can determine what the limitations may need to be.
There's another question about the timeline. So the rules have been published. We are in the comment period, and everybody, you know, I think there's a reason why there's this process, this very open process, and we're in the middle of it right now. And you have all these questions, and we're going to help you get answers, and so will the FAQ be helpful. But they also are very glad to receive, you know, comments that they can take under advisement in terms, and, you know, Greg already said that. I'm just saying it again, you know, that could affect the writing of the rules. So in terms of the timeline, when will they be finalized, Greg or Joe?
Well, we will gather everyone's comments from this first publication, and also we will receive comments back from the joint committees themselves. And after that closes, we will move as quickly as possible, I believe, to go ahead with the second publication. If all of that goes very, very well, the rules would be finalized sometime in March. What I would encourage everyone to do right now, especially on this Cards for Kids legislation, is the law is in effect. It became in effect immediately, and the question has arisen many times, how are we to implement this? I would base your current implementation, if you're faced with this by an applicant, on what the administrative rules say today. I mean, obviously, if the rule was changed, you could modify that practice. But in an effort to issue the card, I would encourage you to move forward with what we believe may be the language.
There's another question about that. Is this something we publicize or just offer when someone comes in to ask about a card?
You know, I think that's, again, up to the library. I believe there are at least a few public libraries that are going to make this into a program per se, or going to proactively seek to do this or assure this. But the way the law is written and the way the rules are filed, it's really, you would respond to the request from the applicant.
Yes, and I will tag on to that because Catherine Yanakovsky at the Joliet Public Library, she and I did a presentation about a lot of this at ILA, and the Joliet Public Library has really jumped on this, and they are already doing it, and they have expanded it because they want to be able to offer more access to kids and non-residents. So and she has, texted me. She's offering to help if anybody has a question. So there you go, Catherine. I hope you don't regret offering to help. I would also say that, back to Chris Seebuck, who said that the law is confusing. I would say that that's new law. I would say that this is not confusing. It is the laws and rules about library cards that are confusing. So, when you just have to start there, this I think is a really well thought out and very welcome to me and to Rails initiative by the state library to try to help kids, especially, school, under the poverty level, and however you want to define them, disadvantaged children, to get some access to library services. So we're glad that you're doing this, and we stand poised to help our libraries in any way that we can. I think we better move on because we have the other exciting topic of certification, and there's a few things that we want to say about that. Because there's some changes there. And yes, thank you, Julie Milivec, for pointing out that Scott Poynton at White Oak has also done a lot of work with school districts. So okay, Greg, you want to go on with certification?
Sure, and this is really, I'm going to be as brief as possible on this because I think this is still somewhat under development, but the intent is that for the 2021 certification process will be moved back to what would have been the library system all along, because this really is a library system function. And with the new development of L2, et cetera, it will be handled through the work that Rails primarily has done, but also with direction from IHLS and inclusion from the state library as well. It's my understanding that the dates, it is also moving to opening February 15 and closing maybe as late as May 15 of 2021. The administrative rules regarding the certification process don't specify a date or a time period that it must be completed by. It just says that it's an annual process regarding membership with the regional library system. So look for more information regarding that from the state library, from the library systems, et cetera. I'm hesitant to get into some of the questions that we're still trying to address with Ann Slaughter there at Rails between the state library, and because of so many, competing things, COVID being one of them, we haven't got all of the answers, but I think we're very, very close.
Yes, and we will be obviously communicating a lot about certification, as it is still being, it is not completed in terms of on L2. And once we're closer to that, we will be communicating lots. I just wanted to be sure you all know that it's not going to be starting anytime soon because of the pandemic and related staffing issues, et cetera. Just wanted to be sure that got out there, so that, members, you have some breathing space for that. Yes, this is library certification, the annual certification process. Is not starting in January. You probably remember this was suspended during the pandemic. And then there was because we were redoing, upgrading L2, and we listened to everything that libraries directors told us, and, you know, have really, I believe, streamlined what you're going to have to do for certification, especially in terms of, you know, where you have to go to do various things. You're going to do one login on L2. But anyway, let's stay tuned for that one you know, issue at a time. We don't need to worry about this at this moment, and we don't have all the answers anyway. And thank you, Megan Millen from Director and Joliet. You're absolutely right. Catherine Yanukovsky has done a great job, and she's going to be even busier now than she was before. So, yes, Kate, the ILL traffic survey is still going through the State Library website, right?
That's correct.
Yep. Okay. Do you have any other things you want to share, Greg?
I really don't today. I think that's enough for today.
I think that's enough.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's really great to be able to get all this from you. So there's a question here from Kate Hall about the open letter that was sent to you about the IDPH guidance for libraries, and basically she's wondering if you've heard anything.
I have not. I do believe Kate and the four primary signatories on that letter received a response from me.
Mm-hmm.
We have reached out again to IDPH to see what the status might be, but I do not have anything further.
I'm sure you'll let us know.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. And I think we'll move on to our next topic, which is a good segue. We're going to start talking about the realm study related to COVID-19. And obviously, you know, you can continue to ask us questions. You can ask the state library questions, and you can go to the administrative rules and comment directly on the rules that are there. Okay, so the realm study is the IMLS project that was undertaken to initially and mainly look at the transmission of the virus on materials in libraries, museums, and archives. There's been a lot of different testing that's gone on, as I know you are all very well aware. They're continuing to do testing and to monitoring and reviewing emerging research. Obviously, we're not the only ones that are doing research about things that are particularly applicable to our industry. They also do literature reviews periodically that do sort of, you know, pull updated research from all the different industries, all the different countries of the world that are doing research, just to, you know, try to keep us all updated. You should go and look at the website. They provide regular updates on the OCLC Web Junction website. The conversation, I'll start it this way. So there were always envisioned to be sort of three phases of the project initially. The first phase was very much focused on the crisis that was seen in public libraries in terms of how to handle materials. Then in the second phase, they moved on to also look at museums and archives. And the third phase, which is kind of where we are now, was always seen as kind of an open-ended, you know, depending on what the situation was at the time. Because back in March, you know, I don't think that we expected or hoped that we would be, sitting here now doing what we're doing or not doing what we're not doing. So the conversation is what should the next phase look like, and what we've been talking about at the steering committee is really focusing on what libraries, archives, and museums, of course, in my case, particularly libraries, need now or going to need in the future. And I had a very interesting conversation at the last meeting about the advent of the vaccine, which we know is coming. We also know that that's going to present, as wonderful as that will be, its own challenges, that there's already lots of talk, press, whatever, about people who won't trust it, people who don't trust science in general, about how to distribute it, how to educate people about it. And what we realized was that, as we all know, libraries, for very good reasons, are very trusted organizations, and that libraries have a real strength in educating the public about difficult things, about, factual, helping people to understand fact versus non-fact. And that, perhaps we can be very helpful in the next, hopefully soon, phase of, vaccine distribution, vaccine communication, education, et cetera. Possible that we could even be vaccination sites. So I have to say, this gave me hope when we had this conversation. Well, I'm always hopeful, but that not only would the vaccine be coming, but there would also be something very positive that libraries are very good at, that we might be able to be, assisting in solving this, or, starting to solve this problem. So that's what we're thinking. That's what I'm hoping that, this will start to focus on. In the meantime, the Realm folks they've also updated the toolkit that's on the website. They're going to be doing focus groups on what libraries need, not just listening to people on the steering committee or in the working groups. So that is everything that I wanted to tell you today about that. It's all very, vague and iffy, but it's out there, and I think it's a really great conversation to have. And I hope that you all will think about what kind of a role your library might be able to play if and when this time comes. Happy to answer any questions about that. And Monica, while you're thinking about questions, is going to talk to us about what's going on with Rails and COVID, et cetera.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so as so many of you know, beginning on October 27th, Rails did reduce the delivery quarantine period from 7 days to 3 days. Rails staff have continued to monitor all of the updated information that's coming from the Realm study, as Dee just detailed, as well as looking at additional reviews of that Realm data that are coming from qualified staff like the Oregon Department of Health, via the Oregon State Library and similar agencies. And of course, as any additional information comes from IDPH, we will continue to keep that under advisement for any future potential changes to the quarantine. But it has been at 3 days since October 27th. We did want to give you a couple more updates about delivery, as well as some notes just based on some questions that we have received recently. There is a reminder that if you are receiving those blue bins for delivery, please don't use them to quarantine materials. We appreciate that you are continuing to move them through. We did order 2,000 additional containers at the onset of the pandemic, split between our consultant as well as the rest of our Rails locations, but we are seeing some shortages on some routes. So please just continue to remind your folks to continue to move those through. Unlike the onset of the pandemic back in March, the majority of Rails libraries, and especially public libraries, are remaining open for some sort of materials checkout to their communities currently. So no delivery route has approached anywhere near 10% of libraries opting out of delivery. And the majority of libraries who've requested an opt out of delivery have done so on a very temporary basis of about around 2 weeks or so. Please note that as we anticipate that we may occasionally face staffing challenges, as many as you have, in order just to ensure the safety of our staff and our partners. Although we expect very few delays, any delays to your route will be communicated through the delivery strings, and we will deliver your material as soon as possible. We're attempting to be as nimble and efficient as possible just to ensure timely delivery. So thank you so much for your patience during this unusual time. By that, if staff are out and have been informed of symptoms related to COVID, so delivery staff at Rails, libraries that have been visited by that Rails staff member will be alerted through the delivery string of those symptoms. So we want to make sure that you're aware of that as well. Are there any questions about anything that I just said or about delivery? And Mark's on this call as well to help answer. While we're just waiting, just in case there are no questions, we do, again, just want to thank our libraries. We know what difficult positions you're in and how you are continuing to have to adjust and move services. Thank you for continuing to report information through the ticketing system. It is really valuable to us, so thanks.
Thank you, Monica. There do not seem to be any questions at this point, but I'm sure people will keep thinking. All right, so now we're going to talk, well, I think I'll just stop for a minute. Does anybody have any questions about more questions about anything you've heard today? Is there anything that anybody wants us to get back to them about that we missed before we move on? We covered a lot of stuff. If you can't think of anything right now, you know where to find us, that's for sure. Okay, then we'll move on. Oh, there's something in the Q&A. What's this? Oh, thank you for our support. You're welcome. Thank you, Christy. Thanks to Rails for their support. It is our job and our pleasure. We're going to talk about our, oh, there is a delivery thing here. Let's see, is there a date for library certification? It's going to start on February 15th, not January 2nd. But stay tuned for more information on that. And then you see that question in the chat, Monica. Appreciate the information will be shared with libraries on the delivery routes.
Yeah, so my understanding is that once that driver was out of the library and en route, we did send out a message letting each library know that that driver was no longer en route due to COVID symptoms. But there were some considerations around privacy, and so that message did not, around what happened with that driver, did not go out immediately to all drivers. Eventually, we did send that message out, but it was more related to the approach that we chose to take via privacy pieces.
Thank you, Patty. The drivers do a great job, and thank you all again for understanding, as Monica said, that people. I'm sure you all have people sick. I hope not too many, but I mean, we know this is happening. Obviously, it's happening everywhere. It's happening with us, and this definitely affects our staffing and our ability to, run the routes the way that we are used to running them. So just hang in there with us.
And thank you for the message about the drivers doing a great job. We know they do, and we get a lot of wonderful comments from libraries about how they're being approached by their drivers and how things are happening with great safety. We appreciate those comments. And of course, if you see things that we need to change, we also want to hear about those as well. So thank you.
And then in the Q&A to Anna, the per capita discussion, could we send you the information? Yes, I'm not sure. Yes, we can. We'll send you something. I mean, basically, look at the application, you have to use, you have to go through serving our public, but somebody from here will get back to you, or you can also talk to the state library. And Christy, the student needs to provide documentation that they are eligible for the free reduced lunch program. Is that correct, Greg? They have to provide documentation, or is the school department?
The student applicant, the applicant for the card should provide it to the library.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, we will move on to equity, diversity, and inclusion. A couple of big projects going on. I'm going to tell you about the one that our board has started as part of a pretty much ongoing for the last almost year, I would say, maybe more, discussion about equity, diversity, and inclusion. They have formed a committee that just met last week that is charged with advising Rails on how to make the world a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive place. Obviously, specifically libraries, our member libraries, what Rails can do about that, and how we can assist libraries. So as I say, the committee met for the first time last week. We got tons of applicants from all across the service area, all across library type and job description, and we have a committee of about 25 people, includes a number of board members. We also have a consultant that we're working with that is helping us with our internal work that Monica will be telling you about. Biz Lindsay Ryan, I know some of you know her. She's also assisting us with this committee. And one of the things that we really want to do is some point, yes, thank you, Kate, she is fabulous. Some point in the not too distant future, what we want to do is identify a cohort of libraries that are interested in tackling their own EDI work and how Rails can assist them in doing it. So we can't do it yet because we need to know more about it ourselves and get our own organization in a better place. But that's one of the things that we want to do for our members, as well as just sort of general training and information, and also looking to find out what we haven't thought of that you want to know about. So as I said, the committee has just had one meeting. It's obviously, this is a big project, but we want you to be aware that we do want to push it out to our members as quickly and effectively as we can. So it's really the committee is wonderful. It's really passionate, and I want you to know that the board is very committed to this, and we've also put money behind it as well. So Alyssa Williams is disappointed that there's not more downstate representation. We did the best we could, but there will certainly be working groups. I'm sure that we'll find ways to include other people. But I hear you. We wish that we could have even better geographic representation. So duly noted. Monica, do you want to talk about the internal work we're doing?
Yes. So internally, Rails has two major initiatives to address equity, diversity, inclusion. And those are led by Director of Consulting and Continuing Education, Joe Philippak, and our consultant, Biz Lindsay Ryan, that Deirdre just mentioned. It was very important to Deirdre that Rails work to address internal issues within the Rails culture, as well as focus on our work with member libraries and in our communities. So these were very important to us. All Rails staff have attended the first of 2 in-house trainings for this year that are focused on understanding these issues of working culture related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. The first meeting was a 4-hour training session that was facilitated by Biz Lindsay Ryan, and that ensures that the staff are all starting our work on these important issues with the same training framework and shared vocabulary, and that was attended by all staff regardless of location or by position. It was really an important thing that we wanted everybody to participate in. The second all staff training intensive will take place in spring of 2021. Rails also created an in-house task force of staff who are highly focused on addressing issues of EDI in the Rails culture. And that staff is made up of 10 members or 10 staff members of Rails who meet monthly to work towards ensuring that everybody across Rails understands their role and takes responsibility for a positive climate. That staff is represented by a diverse group of individuals who represent various locations, departments, and backgrounds throughout Rails. This group has been meeting since September, and we're very excited about their participation and engagement in this important process, and we're excited to see what they come up with to move us even further in the right direction. Any questions about our process here?
Okay, thank you, Monica. We will now move to, we were talking about L2 before. Now you're actually going to see it. And Anne's going to take us through that.
All right. Hello, everyone. Let me get my screen sharing set here. All right. Could someone give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Awesome. Thank you. So welcome to the new L2. I would imagine by now that many of you have seen it. We launched it almost 3 months ago. So we have been continuing to refine and develop features as well as help people get kind of onboarded to the new platform. So I'm just going to show you a few of the key interesting and important things about L2. And just know that if I don't show you something that you have a question about, you can ask today in the chat, or you can always reach out to us. And we'll show you how in a moment. All right, so L2 is at librarylearning.org. That's a new URL, but the old URL of librarylearning.info does redirect here. We don't anticipate that ending anytime soon, but nonetheless, you may still want to update your bookmarks that you might have or links on any internal library intranets or anywhere you have it linked or bookmarked. So the first thing I want to show you is the big login box on the page when you arrive at L2 and have not already logged in. You enter your login information here. If you have forgotten your password, this is the first new and interesting thing that I'm showing you. The system staff no longer needs to, and kind of can't in most cases, reset your password for you. You can do it yourself, much like any other modern website where you might have an account. If you have forgotten your password, you can just click the Forgot Password link, enter the email that is associated with your account, and you will get an email with a link to reset your own password. So if you have not used L2 in a while and have forgotten your password, this is the first thing you want to do. We did migrate all existing accounts that had unique email addresses associated with them. So if you had an account on the old L2, you most likely have an account on the new L2 as well. So user accounts, if you are a staff member at a Rails or Heartland library, we do highly recommend that you have an L2 account. It allows you to search for and register for continuing education events and to search the directory. So in order to create an account, you would come to librarylearning.org and go to the Create an Account link. that's another thing that you can do yourself now that wasn't as straightforward to manage yourself on the old L2. You just fill out this simple form and then click to create an account. And again, that's another process that will send an automated email directly to your email account with a link that will allow you to log in and set your password. There is a little bit of a lag in this account approval because we do have a review process to approve accounts, because you do have to be on staff at a system member library to have an account at L2. So system staff confirms affiliations, or in some cases they talk to the library director to confirm that affiliation with your library. And I'll get into what those affiliations are in a moment. So there are a lot of library directors that are used to being able to create accounts for their staff member from start to finish in one shot. That's something that we have traded off the ability to do in favor of greater user control and privacy. So we do require that someone, and in this case, it could be the library director, fill out this form on behalf of a user. And then that user does need to then use the confirmation link in their email address to come in and set their own password once their account is approved. But if you're a library director hoping to at least get the process started for your staff, you can fill out this form for them and be able to take it from there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and log in, show you some more stuff. Let's go here. All right, so password is pre-filled, so I will log in, which goes right to my user dashboard. So I'm going to show you a couple things about the user profile. First being the affiliations. So the affiliation is the connection between a user and their workplace, and specifically a specific location of that workplace. So you can see here that my affiliation, I have one, it's with Rails. I could have more than one affiliation if I worked also at, say, a member library, in which case Rails is noted as my primary affiliation, but I could have an additional one for my other job, something to keep in mind as a common situation. And if I needed to add an affiliation, I would go to affiliate with a location. So if I got a job at my local library, I can go in and add my own affiliation. And the process of that is pretty simple. Search results will start to autofill. And then you want to fill out these little bits of information for your affiliation that go into your user profile. So things like job title, email address, and role. I see a little more stuff than some users do. But you would select your responsibilities. I'll show you a little bit more in the user profile. I do not need to add an affiliation for myself. All right, so there are also a few things in the user account that you may want to fill out. You can change your own password if you need to. And you can also add directory information about yourself. We welcome you to add a picture if you like. It is not required. You can also add bio information, social network links, and indicate the areas of interest you have for events, for the system to make event suggestions for you, including target audience. And then we have this privacy setting. You can select a privacy setting for your account. That means, and we have an explanation of it here, your information is still viewable to certain people, but not the general group of users. So it would still be viewable by managers and admins at your library or your consortium or library system, state library, but not anyone else. We do ask that library directors set themselves as visible to other users. This is the case with most folks, but if you're a library director and you have yourself set to private, that can cause some issues with other functioning of some automated functions of the system. So we do ask that library directors set yourselves to visible by other users. All right. So jumping around a little bit, another thing that library directors can do is to manage their own user lists. So I talked a little bit about some stuff that you can do with your own account. So now if you're a library director, you do have some control over aspects of your people's accounts and specifically affiliation. So I'm actually going to show you how to do that by going back to my dashboard and looking at Rails. So if I click on my affiliation, this takes me to the entry for the Burr Ridge Service Center location of Rails. And if I go to the staff list, there are two important links here for library directors and other people with admin permissions at libraries. You can manage your general staff list for the people who are associated with the specific location of your library. And there's also agency level access for administrators. And I will explain the difference between location and agency because it is a little esoteric. But just to show you what that looks like, if I wanted to make some changes to people in my staff list, just click on this list. And if someone were to leave, I could remove their affiliation. D, please don't actually go anywhere. This would not affect any other affiliations that she has. So if you have a staff member who's leaving your library but still works at another library and you know that about them, you won't affect their other affiliations by removing the affiliation with your library. I can also edit certain aspects of an individual's affiliation, including their role. Manager has elevated permissions from staff, and then board is obviously for board members. And again, some of the things that I showed you, you can select whether that person is in some type of director position. We do have these key contact areas that we ask that people designate key contacts for these specific areas of your library. In particular, please make sure that your library has a certification contact as well as a delivery contact. Lots of important stuff behind those functions. But these are things that you can edit on behalf of your staff. And as you saw with my account, they can also edit that for themselves. So now, you notice that I am kind of staying more with the directory functions of L2. That is intentional. We were looking to kind of elevate the position of the directory piece in the new L2. Many of you know it as an event calendar, and I'll show that, talk through the options of that in a minute, but the directory piece is really important. So we have a people directory and a library directory. I'm not going to get into I don't have time for the people directory today, but know that that's there. I'd like to show you the advanced search functions. We have a lot of different search facets that are, here we go, that you can find peer libraries in any of these particular areas, including a new search function for this platform, which is to search on legislative districts. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for public city libraries that are in Rails, and I will just go ahead and search for public libraries in RSA. I probably have a child on Zoom right now, so it's a little slow, but here we go. So these are the search results. If I scroll all the way down, I can download a file of these results, which can be really useful. It just goes into an Excel file. But I'm going to show you a library that has multiple locations to explain the difference between agency and building. So the Peoria Public Library is a city library with multiple locations. And agency versus location, or versus building or location, we're kind of using the terms interchangeably in this case. It has to do with how a library is defined kind of at the state level, to sort of gloss over that a little bit. But an agency is the library as an entity, and the location is the library, physical locations in space. So every single library has an agency. It exists as an agency, and it exists as at least one building. And those entries are distinct in the L2 directory. So when I clicked on Peoria Public Library, in the search results, it takes me to the building entry for the main downtown location of the Peoria Public Library. And it tells me information about that specific location. At the bottom of these results is a listing of all of the other buildings. So I could, if I wanted to look at, say, the staff for a different location or delivery, well, that wouldn't necessarily apply. But if I wanted the, any information about one of their other buildings, I could click through to those search results. And then this purple link here is a link to the agency listing. So that's the library as an entity, and that has lots of kind of top level information about the library's existence, like their control number, population served, legislative districts. That's all in here. Non-resident card information is also available there, which I know we just sort of finished that process, but if you're looking to update your resident card information, you do have to get through to this agency listing and edit it there, which you can do in this edit tab. So that was about all I have time for in terms of showing you how directory stuff works. I am going to have to go back and unlock that against editing so that other people can edit it if they mean to, but I'm just going to quickly show you events now before I finish up. If you click on the events calendar, it does go right to this chronological list of events, but we also have a calendar view, which takes you to kind of the familiar monthly calendar view. So you can look for events that way. And while that loads, you can also look at the options you have to search for events. So you can trust, oh, here we go. There is the calendar listing. You can also look at various durations of event summaries there with the week or day listings. So that is the event calendar in a tiny nutshell. Last thing I want to show you is the help page. If you're looking for help and you're not able to find the answer anywhere else, you can come to the help page. We do have a small and growing list of documents that address specific functions, and you can also contact the help desk at any point. This form sends an email to a ticket system, and we have the excellent admin staff monitoring that every day, so you should get a quick response to your inquiries. So like Greg and Dee have both said, we are busy preparing L2 to be able to handle the annual library certification process, which will begin on February 15th. So stay tuned for more information about that. Additional future feature development is on hold until certification process is underway or done. So by about mid-2021, we will be getting into additional feature development, including probably some enhancements to the calendar month view design. And we are always taking suggestions for additional features. If there's something that is missing or isn't working for you, please feel free to pop that into the help form as well. And we will add it to our list. And that is what I have. I could not see comments while I was talking through that, so I've not seen any questions.
There's a few questions.
I do have several questions,
Okay.
Anne, in chat.
What if you want to have more than one contact at your library for delivery
Or certification.
or anything, right?
So that designation happens in the user account, so you can have certainly more than one certification contact. Let's see. Aaron, I am noting your feature request.
Are you working from the bottom, Ann? From the
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just.
Oh, I should not work from the bottom though, because there are more comments before I have time to read them. Sorry. I'm trying to get caught up here now.
And I can help you a little bit. Tiffany had asked about whether or not staff information was supposed to transfer over. Apparently hers, only her manager's information transferred over. So she's just wondering if she needs to add the staff back in.
So we did have some cases where there were, maybe all the circulation staff at a library shared one email address with their L2 login. So, it's possible that was the case if there was not a unique email address associated with an account in the old L2 that did not transfer over. But Tiffany, maybe just send a message to the help desk and we can help you track that down.
And then what features are available with manager access that are not available with regular staff access? I thought you kind of covered that, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, one of the primary features is that managers are available to then be primary contacts in one of those areas that I highlighted, and also should be able to edit staff affiliations for their location. But other than that, I don't want to speak out of turn. Brian Smith would be the one who knows the most about the more granular features that vary there.
I think some of these are things that
Yeah,
either have
I know
been
some of them
solved or.
Yeah, or technical issues that if you're having a technical issue that you're not understanding, definitely send a report of that to the help desk and we can get you help.
I think that's it for specific questions that you can answer right now.
Well, anyone of you can feel free to reach out to me or the L2 help desk anytime.
Okay. Great. Thanks to you, Anne, to your entire team for bringing this in on time and on budget. It's fantastic. And as you've said, we're not quite done, so it's getting better all the time. As good as it is, as great as it is, it's getting better all the time.
Yeah, a project like this is never actually over. We just keep working on it.
Right, exactly, yeah. So I had inadvertently skipped over something. I apologize to Monica and to all of you. Do you want to just say a couple things about the delivery reopening survey, Monica, before we move on to My Library Is?
Sure. So just very briefly, we just wanted to remind you all about the delivery survey. And so I'm just going to share my screen really quick so you get a chance. Can you all see the screen? Okay.
Yep.
So from the COVID Pulse page that you have at the Rails site, you should be able to get to the reopening survey results dashboard. We just want to encourage you all to continue to fill out the survey. The link to that is also available via the Pulse page, because this information can be really valuable to you all to share as you're looking at the services that libraries in your area are offering, as you talk about what services are happening and when in these spaces. So we wanted to just remind you of a few features and also let you know about a couple of updates so that you can see them. Some people have asked us about downloading these results so that they can search them. There is a spot right here, and it was a little hard to see. So you can see we added this little red circle. So if you want to download this into a spreadsheet and manipulate the data, you can. One thing I do want to note is that the data you download will only be good for that moment. And this survey is upgraded or updated very frequently. So just something to keep in mind. We also wanted to note that some people had asked about just being able to see the detail of whether or not patrons can enter the building rather than all of the questions and detail that led to that. So this last column here, that may patrons enter the building, has been collapsed. And so you can see a simple yes or no. But if you're interested in more of the details about what other libraries are doing in terms of that, you can scroll down and look at the detail here for may patrons enter the building. There is, of course, also the grand total of the general percentage of hours that libraries are open compared to their pre-pandemic hours. And you can sort by individual library, shared ILS, library type, or county if you want to look geographically. And you can also sort by clicking on any of these last updated full library name column types. So I just wanted to encourage you, thank you so much to those of you who are continuing to update with your services as your services change. We really appreciate the information, and it gives us a really great idea about the snapshot of the state and what is happening in our Rails service area, so that we can really see the services that you're offering and how you're serving your communities. So once again, thank you for that, and please continue to update that as you can.
Thank
Are there
you.
any questions at all?
So Kate asked a question about the data, when it's, how it loads, and it, where can we go to update? It's in real time if the library name and control code are entered correctly. If the control code is missing, then it has to be manually updated, which is done a few times a day. I mean, a week, sorry. And there's the survey update link. And thank you everyone for keeping that up to date. It's because you're the ones who are making it great because of all the, you know, updated and complete information in there.
One thing we should note is at the bottom of the survey, there is a place where people can add comments, questions, or suggest a key question if you think that the survey is missing it. So if you have something else you'd like to know, please feel free to add that into the bottom of the survey. Grant has continued to make updates to this as it has moved through, and so we'll continue to monitor that and make updates when necessary.
I don't know if it's updated in real time, and then, okay. So there's no set date, it's just, you know, updated as often as is feasible if it needs to be manually updated. Okay. Turning over now to Mary and Dan to talk about the My Library Is campaign.
Yes, we just wanted to quickly remind everybody about our My Library Is campaign. This started about a year and a half ago, and the intent is to help all types of libraries, all sizes of libraries, to demonstrate their value to their customers, to the administration, to funders, and other stakeholders. This is, of course, more important than ever now, as we don't know what budget reductions or staff shortages, or maybe even worse, libraries are going to be faced with due to the pandemic. Our website is one of the major ways to find out more about the campaign, and it's a very simple URL, mylibraryis.org. I do encourage you to take a look at that. You can see different resources as well as add information about what you're doing at your library to help spread the word about your value. I did want to just point point you in the direction of a couple of the resources on the homepage of the site. We do have the Elders of the Internet video starring Nick Offerman, and a lot of you have probably already seen that. Unfortunately, we debuted that in February of this year, right before the pandemic hit. So we didn't quite get the mileage out of it that we wanted, and we're trying to revive that now, because that was developed in response to a lot of requests from our members for help showing why libraries were even more important in the age of the internet. And again, I suspect that internet usage continues to rise during the pandemic. So this message is certainly still important, and the video remains extremely relevant. So I invite you to take a look at that, to use that through social media, on your websites. There's other suggested ways that you can use the video right below it on our homepage as well. The other thing I wanted to make sure everyone has seen are the talking points that we developed with a consultant for different types of libraries. These are in the Get Started section of the website, and there's a talking point for each of the 4 library types. They're very short. There's several of them. They can be used in different situations. You can customize them. You can print out a nice looking PDF with the talking points on it. But again, this is going to really be important as you figure out different ways to show your value, especially now. And Dan's going to point out a couple more features about the campaign.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. One of the things I want to mention is that we do have a grant, and that is specifically for school libraries. We are partnering with ISLE, the School Library Association. We're going to give away 10 grants of up to $1,000 each. The deadline for that is January 15th, 2021. And actually, we're going to be doing a webinar or a Q&A event, more or less, with ISLE in about a week. It's on the 16th. You can sign up for it L2, and I'll put the link into the chat as well. That'll just kind of go over, what it means to apply for these grants. Again, these are only for school libraries. This is one particular area that we really think needs a lot of help, and we are even making video applications. So if school libraries want to apply via video, they can do that. So I think it'll be a fun way for us to kind of find out a little bit more about what's going on in school libraries. Mary, I also wanted to mention that some of the updates that we are making to our blog, our My Library Is blog. We have frequent posts from a lot of different types of libraries, schools, publics, academics, etc. You can even find stories on there. So we've made that searchable. You can search, you can control based on the type of library or the topic. And we are always looking for new posts. So if you have, topics or programs or projects, whatever that fit within the My Library Is umbrella, we would love to hear them. I'm particularly excited about some of the new posts that are going to be coming up in 2021 and towards the end of the year here. We are working with a new advisory team for the My Library Is campaign, and they are ready to go with a ton of new content on there. So look for that. We'll post it in the e-news. It gets automatically sent to our marketing email list, and of course we put it into our social media. So yeah, I think that's it. If there are any questions, Mary and I would love to tackle them for you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Nicole, for the
That's just the link for the webinar or event that Dan is doing, but I'll add the link to the grant page as well.
great. So what further would you like to discuss at this point? Or are there questions that you have hanging from previously, or this is your time to share news, or if you don't have specific question, anything that the floor is open for any and all comments or questions.
I'll just remind everyone regarding the dashboard to update your library closings and reopenings. That is on the COVID-19 pulse page, just right on the main page of the Rails website. Once you click there, you'll, get into the pulse page and you'll see the link for the survey there. So you can go there anytime, but we also will post that periodically in the e-news as well.
Thank you, Diane, for that update on serving our public. And I assume we'll be getting ours as well, so that's great.
And Kate, you're right. You still should also post your other closings on the closings page. That's exactly right.
Thank you, Nicole, for the note about Fox River Grove. Let's see, we seem to be going back to non-resident issues here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes, congratulations to Swan and Glenside, Roselle, and Warrenville. Fantastic. Very happy to support that project, that's for sure. I don't have a good answer to Nancy Ashbrook. I think in terms of what the vendor database subscription prices are based on. I think that in some cases it is based on library cards. I think that's kind of be a negotiating point. It looks like Layla has something to say about that.
That can actually be a really tricky thing to base cost on because it's so inconsistent across libraries. So some do library cards for families. It can actually really inflate in some cases if you've had a real big push for library cards at your library. So we find usually the most consistent is population, and in some cases circulation. Those are probably the two best and most consistent points when we're looking across all of our 412 publics or our over 500 schools.
So Brooks Severs, the library cards program for all for a number of years for non-resident children's cards. Great, thank you for that offer for the form. Update hours in L2. Does that update the reopening dashboard? I don't.
No, unfortunately, that'd be nice.
Yeah, good idea. We'll get right on that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Anything else anybody wants to share or comment on? I want to thank you all for sticking around. Thanks again to the State Library. I think that was a really important opportunity for people to ask their questions. Thank you, Ann Slaughter. She has confirmed that it does not, that the L2 does not update the reopening survey, but they'll work it. They will put it on the list for future development. Okay. As I said, thanks again, State Library. Thanks to everybody else who attended. Thanks for, especially to those of you who have offered to help your colleagues in different ways. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Catherine Yanikowski, although you didn't really, I offered you, but that's how we get things done best, right? Sharing. Thank you, Catherine. So I guess that we are done then. So have a great rest of December. Great holidays, and we'll see you in 2021, if not sooner. So long.